Most people think the cost of working is stress, or long hours, or maybe dealing with difficult bosses and deadlines. But what's interesting is that when people finally retire, that's usually when they discover the real cost. And I've noticed something over the years. The people who struggle the most in retirement are often not the people who lack money. They're the people who spent decades sacrificing parts of themselves without realizing what it was costing them. Because work gives you income, but sometimes, quietly, it takes other things away. Your time, your health, your relationships, even your sense of identity. And the strange part is, you often don't notice those losses until the job finally stops. So in this video, I want to talk about the hidden costs of working and why understanding them earlier could completely change the way you live the next chapter of your life. Now, the first hidden cost that many people discover after retirement is that work slowly replaced their identity. I remember speaking with someone who had worked as an engineer for almost 40 years. Very disciplined person, extremely respected in his field. People depended on him constantly. His phone rang all day. His schedule was packed. His opinion mattered everywhere he went. And then he retired. And about 6 months later, he told me something that surprised him. He said, "I didn't realize how much of my self-worth came from being needed." And I think that hits a lot of people harder than they expect. Because for decades, people introduced themselves through their profession. I'm a teacher. I'm a business owner. I'm a manager. I'm a nurse. Eventually, the career stops becoming something you do. It becomes who you are. And then retirement arrives. And suddenly, nobody needs you in the same way anymore. The emails stop, the meetings disappear, the constant urgency fades away. And at first, that sounds relaxing. But after a while, for some people, it becomes unsettling. Because if your entire identity was attached to productivity, retirement can feel strangely empty at first. And I think this is one of the hidden emotional costs of working too much. You can spend so many years building your career that you forget to build yourself outside of it. So the fix here is not necessarily to work less. It's to build an identity that's larger than your profession. Develop interests outside of work. Invest in hobbies, friendships, curiosity, your health, your family. Because eventually your job title ends, but you still remain. And the people who transition into retirement the smoothest are usually those who already knew who they were before the career ended. Now, the next hidden cost of working is something people often notice physically after retirement, and that is how much stress their body had normalized. I knew someone who worked in corporate sales for decades. Constant travel, constant pressure, always chasing targets, always available by phone. Even during vacations, his laptop was open. And when he finally retired, something interesting happened. For the first few months, he slept constantly. Long naps, deep sleep, sometimes 10 hours a night. At first, he thought something was wrong medically. But eventually he realized his body was simply recovering from years of stress that he had accepted as normal. And I think a lot of people underestimate this. The body keeps score even when the mind tries to push through. Because when you're working constantly, stress often becomes invisible. You stop noticing the tension in your shoulders, the poor sleep, the headaches, the elevated blood pressure, the exhaustion you carry into every weekend. And many people convince themselves that this is just adulthood, that this is normal life. But retirement creates contrast. For the first time in decades, the nervous system slows down enough to realize how overloaded it actually was. So the fix is to stop treating health as something that can wait until retirement, because your health is not separate from your retirement plan. It is the retirement plan. The quality of your future is going to depend heavily on the habits you build now. Your sleep, your movement, your stress levels, your relationships, your eating habits. Those things compound quietly over time. And unlike money, health becomes much harder to rebuild later. Now, another hidden cost of working that surprises many people after retirement
is how much work controlled their time without them realizing it. I spoke with a woman who retired at 67, and she told me something fascinating. She said, "I used to think I had no time because I was busy. But now I realize I had no time because work decided almost everything for me." And I think that's incredibly true. Work doesn't just take the hours you're at the office, it shapes your entire day around itself. Your sleep schedule, your meals, your energy, your weekends, your vacations, even your mood sometimes. And over enough years, people slowly adapt their entire lives around work rhythms. They wake up to alarms they hate, rush through mornings, eat quickly, delay hobbies, delay travel, delay rest, delay relationships. Always telling themselves, "I'll have more time later." But later arrives much faster than most people expect. And this doesn't mean people should feel guilty for working hard. Many people had responsibilities, families, bills, obligations. But it does mean we should become more conscious of the trade-offs we're making, because every yes to work is also a no to something else. Now, another hidden cost that retirement reveals is how work can quietly shrink your world. And what I mean by that is many people spend years trapped inside routines so repetitive that they stopped growing outside of their profession. Wake up, commute, work, come home tired, repeat. And eventually years start blending together. I remember someone saying to me once, "I was so busy building a career that I forgot to build a life." And that sentence stayed with me, because I think many people feel that way privately. They postponed interests, postponed learning, postponed adventure, and then retirement finally arrives, and suddenly they ask themselves, "What do I even enjoy anymore?" That can be a difficult question when work consumed most of your energy for decades, because human beings need more than productivity. We need curiosity. We need experiences that make us feel alive again. Now, another hidden cost of working too much is something many people only notice in their relationships later in life, and that is emotional absence. Because you can physically be present for years while mentally being somewhere else entirely, thinking about deadlines, thinking about work problems, thinking about tomorrow's meeting. And over enough time, relationships can become transactional without meaning to. You talk logistics instead of connection, schedules instead of emotions, responsibilities instead of experiences. And many retirees eventually realize that while they provided financially, they sometimes struggled to be fully present emotionally. Now again, this is not about blame. Most people were simply trying to survive and do their best. But retirement often creates enough silence for people to finally notice what was neglected. And sometimes relationships improve beautifully in retirement because people finally slow down enough to reconnect. But other times, the distance becomes obvious, especially when couples spent decades organized around work routines instead of intentional connection.